I've always prided myself on being a pretty laid-back person. I work from home, enjoy quiet evenings with a good book, and I've always made an effort to be a good neighbor. When I bought my house in Willowbrook, I had big plans for the future, weekend barbecues, garden parties, and maybe even a dog or two. I was ready to build my life in a small suburban neighborhood, a place where the grass is green, the streets are clean, and the neighbors wave as they pass by. My name's Sam, and for the most part, things were going just as I had hoped. The house was perfect for me, spacious, comfortable, and with a garage big enough to park my car and store all the gear I'd accumulated over the years. It was my sanctuary, my personal space. But there was one small issue in the neighborhood, Karen. You know the type, the one neighbor who always seems to think that their opinion should govern everyone's life. The one who believes that rules are only for everyone else, and they're the exception. And in this neighborhood, Karen's rulebook was the HOA guidelines, which she took way too seriously. She seemed to think that her role in life was to oversee everyone's behavior, from how they trimmed their hedges to the type of mailbox they had. If there was a rule, she would find a way to enforce it, whether it applied to her or not. I crossed paths with Karen a few times, mostly in passing. I'd been polite, but I quickly learned that politeness wasn't going to cut it with her. She wasn't content to simply be a neighbor. She had to be the queen of the block. Her sense of entitlement was something else entirely. At first, I tried to ignore it. But over time, Karen's behavior began to get under my skin, and I could tell I wasn't the only one who felt that way. Little things like her unsolicited advice about how I should trim my bushes or how she'd suggested my new car didn't quite match the neighborhood aesthetic started to add up. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I was beginning to feel like my personal space, my home, was being invaded. And that was just the beginning. Karen's behavior wasn't just limited to the occasional unsolicited advice. Oh no, that would have been manageable. What really started to get to me was how she seemed to believe that she could invade my life at any given moment, regardless of whether I asked for her input or not. It was like she considered herself the self-appointed ruler of the neighborhood, and everyone else was just living in it under her watchful eye. One morning, I came out to find Karen standing at the edge of my driveway, clipboard in hand, staring at my lawn. She didn't even acknowledge me when I walked up, just continued scribbling something down with a smug little smile on her face. It was the middle of summer, and I had spent hours the weekend before making sure my yard looked as good as possible. I'd even fertilized it and trimmed the bushes. It was as perfect as it was going to get. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Oh, I'm just noting a few things," Karen replied, not even looking up. "Your grass is just a bit too long, and I noticed a few dandelions poking through. You know, the HOA has very specific guidelines about lawn care." I blinked. "It's perfectly fine. I've already taken care of it." Karen raised an eyebrow, as though she were judging my words for credibility. "I don't think the HOA would agree. You might want to check the rules again. I'll make a note of this. You'll want to take care of it soon." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked off. No apology. No thank you. Just a sense of superiority, as though she had done me a favor by informing me about my own yard. It wasn't the first time Karen had done this. In the past, I got notes on my door about my mailbox being too modern, my choice of bushes being out of line with neighborhood standards, and even the improper placement of my outdoor chairs. I had tried to keep it cool, but it was getting harder and harder to let these little slights slide. I started to feel like I was constantly being watched, judged, and controlled by Karen, who had absolutely no authority over me. At first, I told myself that maybe she just had too much time on her hands. But as weeks passed, I couldn't help but feel the frustration building up. The last straw came when I caught her in the act of leaving a warning note on my garage door, telling me that my car was parked too close to the curb. It wasn't just about her meddling. It was about the fact that she thought she had the right to dictate every little detail of my life. It was one of those days where the stress of the neighborhood had gotten to me, and I was trying to shake it off. I had just returned from running errands when I pulled up to my house, ready to park my car in my garage. I turned the corner into my driveway, expecting to see the empty space where my car usually sits. But when I reached the garage, I froze. There, parked directly in front of the garage, was Karen's car, a silver sedan that was just barely squeezed into my personal space. It was blocking my driveway, completely obstructing the garage door, leaving me no way to park my car or even get inside. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she parked there temporarily while she was visiting a neighbor, or maybe just drop something off. But no. I saw Karen through the window, standing in her kitchen, looking out smugly with a cup of tea in her hand, as if she couldn't care less about the mess she'd caused. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I wasn't going to let her ruin my day, but this crossed the line. Without even thinking, I marched to her front door and knocked. She opened it, her usual fake smile plastered on her face. "Oh, hey, Sam. Is there something I can help you with?" I couldn't hold back. "Karen, your car is parked in front of my garage. I can't get into my own driveway." She blinked, then casually glanced over her shoulder. "Oh yeah, I noticed your garage door was closed, so I just figured I'd park here for a little while. It's no big deal, right? I'm just running some errands." "Karen, that's my garage," I snapped, feeling the frustration bubbling up. "That's not how this works. I need to park there, and your car is blocking me. Can you move it?" She didn't seem the least bit apologetic. In fact, she crossed her arms and gave me an almost dismissive look. "Well, it's just for a bit. I'm sure you can find somewhere else to park. It's not like you'll need the whole garage right now, will you? I'm doing a little organizing of my own and thought it'd be convenient to leave my car here." My blood boiled. You can't just park in my garage without asking. That's not how it works in a neighborhood like this. It's a clear violation of basic respect. She tilted her head, unbothered, as if she didn't even understand why I was upset. "You're overreacting. It's just a small inconvenience." I clenched my fists. "No, it's not small, and it's not okay. Move your car now." Karen smirked. Fine. I'll move it later, but I'm sure it'll be fine just for a little while." I walked away, trying to calm myself. I stood there, staring at her car blocking my garage, trying to figure out what to do next. It wasn't just the parking. It was everything leading up to this moment. Karen had taken over the neighborhood, and now she was taking over my personal space too. But I wasn't going to let it slide this time. I wasn't going to just be the nice guy and let her get away with it. This time, I was going to make sure she understood that there were consequences for crossing boundaries. I thought about it for a moment, trying to figure out the best way to handle the situation. I could have asked her again to move her car, but that seemed pointless. The way Karen acted, it was clear she didn't take me seriously. I could see the way she dismissed my concerns, the way she thought her small actions didn't matter to anyone else. That's when it hit me. Maybe I didn't have to engage with her at all. Maybe the best way to handle this was to stop playing by her rules. I walked into my garage, locked the door behind me, and stood there for a few seconds. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I had an idea. And the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. I went inside my house, grabbed my bag, and started packing. I wasn't going to let this petty situation take over my life any longer. Instead of letting Karen ruin my day or even my week, I was going to do something she wouldn't expect. I grabbed my phone, shot a quick text to a few friends to let them know I was going away for a while, and then with a quick glance at my garage still blocked by her car, I locked the door and left. I had no immediate plans, just the idea that I could get away, disconnect, and let her stew in the mess she'd made. I booked a small Airbnb upstate for a few days. I needed to reset, and this was my opportunity. For a whole week, I stayed away from the neighborhood. I explored new places, went hiking, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to think about the constant tension with Karen or any of her intrusive behavior. I enjoyed the quiet, the peace of not dealing with the little things that seemed to trigger her dominance over my life. Meanwhile, back at Willowbrook, I could only imagine the scene she'd created when she realized I was gone. I left her to deal with her own actions. There was something deeply satisfying about knowing I was taking control of my life, even if it meant stepping away temporarily from all the chaos. When I returned from my week away, I was curious to see what kind of chaos Karen had stirred up in my absence. The moment I pulled back into the driveway, I noticed her car was no longer blocking my garage, but there was something odd about the scene. My neighbor, Mrs. Benson, was standing on the sidewalk, looking very concerned as she waved me down. "Sam, thank goodness you're back," Mrs. Benson said, walking quickly toward me. "Karen's been in quite the state since you left. I've never seen her so frazzled." "Frazzled?" I asked, genuinely curious. "What happened?" "Well, it started with your garage door being locked," she explained, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "Karen tried to park there again after you left, but when she couldn't get the door open, she started knocking on your door, calling you, even going through your mail, trying to get hold of a spare key." She had no idea where you'd gone, didn't even realize you'd left for a week. I tried to suppress a grin. Karen had never taken me seriously, and now it seemed she was starting to panic over something as simple as access to my garage. Mrs. Benson, you wouldn't believe the nonsense I've had to put up with from Karen, I replied, crossing my arms. But I'm guessing she didn't learn anything while I was gone. Well, let's just say the neighborhood's been a little quieter without you around, Mrs. Benson added, giving me a knowing look. Karen definitely learned that maybe she can't just take over other people's spaces without consequences. The more I listened, the more I realized just how much of a hold Karen had tried to keep on everyone, and how my absence had thrown her completely off balance. For once, it seemed like she was the one who was uncertain, scrambling to figure out what was going on in her perfect little world. She even came over a couple of times, trying to see if you were home, Mrs. Benson continued, raising an eyebrow. I don't think she was expecting to be completely ignored for a whole week. But honestly, it seems like she finally got the message. You don't have to be at her beck and call. I chuckled to myself. The thought of Karen going door to door, knocking on my neighbors, asking about my whereabouts was exactly the kind of chaos I'd hoped she'd experience. It was like she had built up her entire world around controlling others, and when I stepped out of it, she had no idea how to react. The next morning, I saw Karen outside her house as I was taking a walk. She was trimming her hedges, and I could see her glancing at me every few seconds, clearly trying to figure out how to approach me. I couldn't help but smile. I'd been waiting for this moment, knowing that sooner or later, she'd have to come face to face with the reality of her actions. As I approached her yard, she set down the pruning shears, cleared her throat, and called out, "Hey, Sam. Can we talk for a minute?" I raised an eyebrow, stopping a few feet away from her. "Sure, Karen. What's on your mind?" "Well, first off, I just wanted to say," she paused, almost as if weighing her words, "I'm sorry for, causing any problems while you were gone. I didn't mean to make things difficult for you. I didn't know what was going on when you locked the garage and left. You kind of, left me in a difficult position." I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to gloat, to remind her of the countless times she'd overstepped her boundaries. But I decided to stay calm. This was my moment to take control and set things straight once and for all. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice level, "it's not about what happened while I was gone. It's about the fact that you've consistently crossed boundaries, whether it's with my garage or my lawn or any other small thing you think you have the right to control." She shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting me to confront her so directly. "Well, I'm just trying to keep the neighborhood nice. I thought we were all supposed to be on the same page about these things." I nodded. "I get it. We all want the neighborhood to be nice. But you can't just go around acting like the HOA is your personal tool to enforce your own standards. I've been living here for a while, and I've never once received a formal complaint or had any issues until you decided to take matters into your own hands." Her face flushed, and she began to stammer. "I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I thought the rules were important." I sighed, folding my arms. "Here's the thing, Karen. You seem to think that you're in charge of everyone's property, but you're not. In fact, you might be surprised to find out that I'm the new HOA president." Her eyes widened in shock. "Wait, what?" I nodded. "Yeah, it turns out, while you were busy trying to enforce all these rules on everyone else, I was elected to lead the HOA. So from now on, if you have an issue with my lawn or my garage, you'll be dealing with me." For a moment, there was complete silence. Karen stood frozen, her mouth slightly agape. I could tell she was trying to process the information. It was like she was trying to reconcile the image she had of herself as the neighborhood enforcer with the reality that I now held the power she had tried to wield for so long. Finally, she spoke, her voice shaky. You're the president." "But I didn't even know." "That's because you've been too busy focusing on everyone else's business," I said, my tone calm but firm. "From now on, if you have any issues with how things are run, you can bring them to me. But keep in mind, there's a way to communicate respectfully, and it's not by overstepping your boundaries every chance you get." Karen nodded slowly, clearly caught off guard. I'll make sure to do that." I gave her a tight smile. "Good. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some things to take care of. I'll be seeing you around, Karen." The following days felt different in Willowbrook. The tension between Karen and me seemed to have lifted, but in a way that was both awkward and oddly refreshing. Karen wasn't on my case about my garage anymore, and she was noticeably quieter around the neighborhood. It was as though my new role had forced her to reevaluate her approach to community life. To my surprise, there was a small meeting scheduled by the HOA, and as the new president, I was expected to attend. When I arrived, Karen was already there, sitting in the back corner, her arms crossed. She looked at me with a kind of subdued wariness, but said nothing as I walked in. I could sense she was trying to figure out how this would play out now that I had the power. I began the meeting with a brief introduction, acknowledging the challenges we'd all been facing lately. I shared a few plans for neighborhood improvements and mentioned that it was important to me that we operate with fairness and mutual respect, something that had been lacking when Karen was so deeply involved in the micromanaging of the neighborhood. From now on, if there are concerns or disagreements, we'll handle them in a more transparent, collaborative way, I said, glancing at Karen. Everyone's voice matters, but it's important to approach issues with respect for one another. Karen, clearly feeling the weight of her recent actions, nodded along, though she didn't speak. The other neighbors seemed to appreciate the shift in tone, and the meeting moved forward smoothly. It was a small victory, but it was one I'd earned by simply standing my ground. Later, I caught Mrs. Benson outside. She smiled as I approached. "So, I take it Karen's finally learned to back off?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. I grinned. She's definitely had a reality check. It's going to take a while for her to get used to this new dynamic, but things are changing around here. "And you'll be running the show now, huh?" Mrs. Benson said with a wink. "I think we could use a little more of that around here." I chuckled. "I'm just here to make sure everyone gets treated fairly. But if Karen decides to push things too far again, she'll have to deal with me." Officially, as I walked back to my house that evening, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle over me. The power struggle was over, and I had won, not by being combative or cruel, but by standing firm and refusing to let someone else dictate my life. Karen, for all her attempts to control things, had underestimated me. And in the end, it wasn't just about the garage or the lawn. It was about maintaining my peace, my space, and my right to live freely in my own home. I let the neighborhood return to normal, but with one key difference. I was no longer at the mercy of Karen's little rules. And for the first time in a long time, it felt good to be in control.